Another top grades video made easy. The prediction for Jekyll and Hyde. I'm going to show you what the question I think is going to be. It is on the nature of evil. This might be just about Hyde, but it's more likely to be evil in general in the novel. I'm then going to show you my essay plan. I'm going to try and do this super quickly, even though there are 16 points to cover. And then I'm going to show you how to apply this essay plan if this question doesn't come up, because you can make this fit any question that does come up. I'm going to begin with the thesis statement. So we're going to say that Stevenson is writing this novel in order to explore his readers' interests in violence and crime and sin. It has a Christian perspective for a Christian reader, but it also subverts that perspective for those like Stevenson who had rejected Christianity. And the ending is going to make us ask, is this a Christian novel where the evil of Jekyll and Hyde is punished, or does that evil continue because it's inside all of us? Then we get straight in with our first quotation. It is the damned Juggernaut one, our introduction to Hyde, suggesting that he is evil. So damned and damnation immediately takes us to sophisticated imagery of hell, but Juggernaut comes from Hindu, the Juggernaut. It's part of their religious festival, and so this is a way that the British are demonising other religions. And so this is called, in the study of literature, othering, the fear of the other, the thing that's different. So either we take the Christian perspective, it's bad, or we take what I think is Stevenson's perspective. There's nothing inherently evil about it, it's just another religion. Now, that perspective, whether Hyde is actually evil at the beginning, is one that we're going to explore next. Let's look at the language used to describe his action. The girl crashes into him, falls over, he just ignores her, and then trampled calmly, so that's almost like an oxymoron. How can you trample on somebody calmly? And then he's actually not trampling on somebody, he's trampling over the child's body. In other words, he's taken one step, bosh, and then carried on walking. He hasn't stood on top of her trampling at all. So this verb, is Enfield's exaggeration. And so what Stevenson is suggesting here is that there's nothing much wrong with Hyde. He's not evil, he's just doesn't really care about this child, but he doesn't do anything deliberately to hurt her. Now, this is contrasted straight away with Enfield's reaction and the doctor. I saw the sawbones turn sick and white with desire to kill him. And we're going to focus on the word sick here because Stevenson is suggesting that this reaction is a sickness. Now, both Enfield and the doctor, and even the child's family, all want to kill Hyde. Christian interpretation, this proves how inherently evil he is. Different interpretation, if you reject Christianity, is who is the evil figure here? It's Enfield and the doctor, the civilised, respectable, middle-class men. What does Stevenson do next? Well, he gets Enfield to describe Hyde like Satan, but then he says, we screwed him up to £100. So, Enfield and the doctor blackmail Hyde. So they are the ones committing a crime. They are the ones who are evil, the respectable men. So they don't just feel evil intentions, they act on evil intentions they think they can get away with. And so Stevenson is saying Hyde enters a society which is already much more evil than he is. And that's going to be important when we see how he develops through the novel. At number 5, we've got Utterson's description of what he thinks is the blackmail Hyde must be carrying out with Jekyll, and he imagines what the cause must have been. He cannot voice it. He can't say what the cause is because he keeps it secret. Also, Stevenson keeps it secret. It's a massive mystery what it is that Hyde gets up to. Total mystery. We'll get to that later. But whatever it is, it's bad enough to be blackmailed. However, Utterson just calls it a caper. He underplays it. This is a euphemism. Why does Stevenson do that? He's trying to show that this society covers up sin. And so these middle-class men cover for each other. Even the language that they use shows that it was no big deal, even though if it got out in public, it would be a massive big deal. And Utterson supposes Jekyll would pay a fortune to Hyde to keep whatever he got up to silent, because obviously he doesn't know that Hyde is Jekyll and Jekyll is Hyde. Right, I bracketed the next 8, 6 to 8, and this is because this is a further development if you want full marks. So you don't have to have these in your essay, and that will make it shorter. I've actually written this essay for you, and you can find it in the link in the description. It's totally free, and it's 100% 30 out of 30 mark essay. If you want it, you know, I'm not forcing you. So, we have Enfield saying that he came from some place at the end of the world when he saw Hyde trample on the girl. So this is another euphemism. What has he been up to at the end of the world? Probably exactly the same sort of sinful behaviour that Hyde has been up to. Stevenson is pointing out Hyde and Enfield are no different, apart from the fact that Enfield is worse. He's more evil. We also have this idea, the end of the world reminds us of the end of the world in Christianity, Armageddon. And so it references the idea that we're all born with sin, original sin, and we all give into it. And it's only civilized behaviour that stops us giving into it fully. However, Enfield gives into it, just like Hyde does, just like Jekyll used to before he created Hyde to have those sinful pleasures for him. And so now we get this idea of hypocrisy of middle-class men, and perhaps all men. This is also revealed in the setting. So Hyde's house is in Soho, but that is about a 5-minute walk max away from Jekyll's house, which is in Leicester Square. Jekyll's house is described as handsome, and the back door to Jekyll's house, where Hyde enters, is described as sordid. So these look like two completely different properties, but actually they're one and the same place. This, of course, symbolises how we're all a mixture, or commingled, as Jekyll says, a mixture of good and evil. That is our natural state. If that is our natural state, the Christian interpretation is we're all born evil with original sin and we're corrupt. Stevenson's interpretation might well be, well, if we've all been born with these instincts, are they actually good and evil? Or is this just what we call being human? You know, why do we have this false sense of morality that whatever people get up to in Soho is a sin? It's only society, and Christian society, that decides that's a sin. And he emphasises that because these two areas are right close together. So the Christian interpretation would be these rich men are hypocrites. They're pretending to be respectable, but actually they're spending their evenings out in Soho doing God knows what that they shouldn't. Stevenson's perspective might be, no, this is just what it is to be human. No crimes are being committed. Let it be. Allow it. Right, number 9. We've just had it. We are commingled out of good and evil. And this is an anti-Christian message, because the Christian idea is that we're born evil and we've got to do everything possible to suppress it. This idea that we're actually commingled out of it is that you can't really separate our evil from our good. They're intertwined. It's just who we are. So it's not like we're two parts. We are mingled together. You can't get rid of it. Then we come to the massive evil act in the novel, the killing of Sir Danvers Carew. Now Hyde does this and we don't know why. So why has Stevenson put that in? Well, partly it's to give his Christian readers this idea that Hyde is completely evil, pure evil. However, it's also there because Sir Danvers Carew is an MP and he gets murdered by the Houses of Parliament close by. So what Stevenson is saying is that no part of society is safe. Everyone can be a potential victim of crime. That takes us back to our thesis statement where he's just pandering to the interests of the reader. But does he like his readers' obsession with crime? Stevenson isn't a crime novelist. He doesn't normally write detective stories. He's doing this because he wants to earn cash and he has to give the readers what they want. Doesn't mean he respects them. So our clue that he doesn't respect them is that he uses someone to stand in for the evil reader. Who is that? It is the maid who faints when she sees the murder of Danvers Carew, but then look at the quote that describes her afterwards. And so she used to say, with streaming tears, when she narrated the story. In other words, after the event, she wasn't so traumatised that she couldn't talk about it. She was so excited that she couldn't stop telling people about it. And every time she told people about it, she made sure she was crying tears because it was so awful. Well, if it was so awful, she wouldn't be continually telling the tale, would she? And so this is his way of saying, look, evil is part of all of us. We are all attracted to sin. But does that make it something that is awful in society, as the church teaches us, or should we just accept ourselves for who we are? Because nobody dies about when the maid tells this story. The death has already happened. She's not harming anyone. Then we get to another central mystery, the description of Hyde's killing of Carew. We never find out why he does it. All we see is his ape-like fury. Well, this is giving his readers what they want again, violence, but it's also tapping into this idea of evil. So, you know already that ape-like fury refers to Darwin's theory of evolution, and the Victorians were very afraid of this theory because it said the Bible wasn't literally true. Now, up to that, everybody assumed that it was. Everybody is an exaggeration, but scientific developments in the 1800s showed that the Earth was many years older than the 6,500 that it was supposed to be from the Bible. And now we had this theory of evolution, which said we were all descended from animals, not created by God. But worse than that, the theory of evolution predicts survival of the fittest. And what this means is that the evil Hyde could be what we all evolve into if the evil Hyde succeeds. Because evolution just rewards the dominant gene, the people that survive. So if Hyde ends up surviving, then we could all end up being like him, because that would be the easiest way for evolution to happen. So this is another fear. In the Christian belief, we become better and better people. But in the evolutionary belief, we might not become better and better people. We might go the other way. There's no advantage. If there's no advantage to being good, we will choose to be evil because that gives us more success. Next, we come to Jekyll's confession. But I use the word confession lightly. It's not called, the chapter isn't called his confession, and actually he doesn't actually confess. He lies to us about why Hyde has killed Carew. How do I know it's a lie? Well, because he doesn't say why it happens. He just says, my devil came out roaring, as though he had no explanation for it. And then he says that Hyde mauled the body, again going back to the ape-like fury, the animal-like instincts. But what he also tells us is that Hyde is his bravo. A bravo is somebody who acts on your behalf. Hyde acts on Jekyll's behalf. Hyde does what Jekyll wants to do, therefore Hyde does what Jekyll wants him to do. Why do we know that? Because we know that Jekyll experiences everything that Hyde does as well. So let's rewind. That now suggests that there is a motive for killing Carew. Jekyll has a reason for killing him, but he keeps it secret from the reader, and the reader, of course, is Utterson. That's who the letter's for. So he doesn't tell Utterson why he did it, but this makes him an unreliable narrator. We have to infer. The Christian interpretation is, yeah, it's just original sin. You've created this Hyde character who's got no ounce of goodness in him. This is what real evil looks like. But the other possibility is that there is a hidden motive. That's all to do with homosexuality. I'm not going to give you that now, because if you don't know that interpretation, you're going to go, what? Never. And you're just going to leave it out of your essay. But remember, my essay, which gets you 30 out of 30 marks, is in the description. And so that will explore the homosexuality angle if you want it. Most of you probably won't. So you're going to go for Stevenson giving us the idea of original sin, which gives us a link back to our thesis statement and is giving us the Christian perspective that most of the readers would have had. Okay. Continuing the idea of Jekyll being evil himself, having original sin, and having Hyde as his bravo, is the mysterious death of Dr. Lanyon. So Dr. Lanyon, passionate Christian, and he's had a massive argument with Jekyll over his scientific heresies. That is a Christian word for false beliefs that go against God. So Jekyll, in the form of Hyde, asks Lanyon, will you be wise? Meaning, will you not look at what I'm about to do because it's going to scare the hell out of you? But Lanyon chooses to see it. He is tempted. And so Jekyll has a very good idea of what's going to happen to Lanyon's mind. Lanyon completely loses his desire to live in a world in which these scientific heresies can come true, and he decides he would rather die. He can't kill himself because then he'll go to hell, but he kind of gives up on life, and therefore he hopes, goes to heaven to escape the unchristian world that's being created by science, linked to Darwin's theory of evolution, but also linked to the original sin of Jekyll. So now we've proven that Jekyll has got these deliberately violent intents to harm other people, and Hyde is carrying that out for him. Therefore, both of them, Hyde and Jekyll, are punished at the end. Evil is punished. They both die. Brilliant Christian ending to the novel. Good is restored, respectability is restored, but is it? This is where Stevenson comes in. We have the silence of Gabriel Utterson. Utterson has had Lanyon's letter telling us all about this transformation from Hyde into Jekyll. We've also had Jekyll's explanation, his confession, and so we can find out all about all the sins he's committed. We can find out that he was Hyde. I say we, like the police or society. But what does he do? He puts those things in his safe. Why? Because there is another document, a third document, which is Jekyll's will. And the will no longer says everything goes to Hyde. It says everything goes to Utterson. So Utterson hides all this information because he wants to inherit from the will. However, as a man in respectable society, he won't be able to inherit all of Jekyll's property with a clear conscience if he is exposed as a heretical madman who's created a monster and a murderer. So he keeps it all hidden. Now, what does he call Utterson? He calls him Gabriel. Gabriel, the most famous angel in the Bible, a symbol of Christianity. This juxtaposition with how Utterson behaves is completely ironic and deliberate because Stevenson is undermining the Christian message of the novel. He's saying that we are all corrupt, like Utterson. So that's one reading. Leave us be, we're all like this. Or he's saying Utterson is typical of middle-class men, not all of us. These hypocrites like Dr. Jekyll and his friends, they're the ones who are worst in society. So you can choose to interpret that either way you want. Now, we jump to our conclusion where we're saying that the book has criticised civilised morality, either as false because it's Christian or false because it goes against human nature. He's saying it's hypocritical. He's saying it's just a veneer, it's just a facade that we put on, but he's also saying it's damaging. So in the Stevenson reading, Hyde is only created because society won't let Jekyll do what he needs to do to have his innocent pleasures. I say innocent because they're not against the law, but they're just disapproved of. So Hyde is created because society doesn't let people be themselves. That's basically the message. Or the Christian message is that Hyde is damaging because there hasn't been proper moral control from Jekyll, and Jekyll just proves how we need to be always watchful against our sinful desires. Pick either of those interpretations that you want. You can deal with both of them in conclusion and say which one's best. Brilliant. You've got 30 out of 30. Where are you going to find the essay? I'm just checking that you were listening. Right, so what do I do if the question is on Jekyll or Hyde? I don't really have to go through that, do I? Because all of this has been about Jekyll and Hyde. So you could apply it all. What would you do if this is about setting? Well, if it's about setting, you're going to bosh into these. You're going to add in the idea that Jekyll's house is the John Hunter house. John Hunter was a famous surgeon who led to massive medical advances because he dissected bodies and worked out all kinds of cures, or rather all kinds of ways of having successful operations without killing people. Loads of people's lives were saved. Figure of good. However, there was then a scandal where people found out that in order to dissect these bodies, he had to pay people to go and rob graves and bring them back illegally. Evil. See how we are commingled out of good and evil. Now, his readers would have understood that this was the John Hunter house, and they would have understood that John Hunter was a problematic figure. However, by the time that Stevenson was writing, there were statues of John Hunter all around Leicester Square. Hero. So Stevenson's pointing out what we now see as a sin, we might later see as heroic and wonderful. So you can see how that fits with the idea of whether Jekyll and Hyde are truly evil. So that's my setting one. What if it's about Utterson? People panic about Utterson. I don't think you'll get a question about Utterson on his own. Well, what I told you about the ending is absolutely crucial. We could add in an extra bit that, I hope you remember this. Remember the letter that he sees from Hyde saying that he's gone away, and he takes it to his assistant at the law firm who looks at it, and he's a handwriting expert, it's just a miracle. And he says, oh, I think that was written by the same person who wrote Dr. Jekyll's invitation, and therefore they are one and the same person. Utterson doesn't reveal that to the police. In fact, He doesn't reveal any of his suspicions about what's going on with Hyde and Jekyll to the police, and he swears Guest to secrecy. At the end, he also swears Paul, the butler to Jekyll, to secrecy. And so Paul is not supposed to tell anyone about the will, about Lanyon's letter, and about Jekyll's confession. Utterson, therefore, is completely corrupt, and he represents the corruption of middle-class men at the time, or all of society at the time, depending on how you want to interpret it. I can't think of another question you'll get asked. What we've just talked about is the same as dual nature, isn't it? Good and evil. So that might sound like a different question, but it's actually exactly the same. You now know how to apply it completely. If you would like to revise all the themes of Jekyll and Hyde to make sure you're fully prepared for whatever comes up, which you don't need because this has fully prepared you, but just in case, then that's the video coming up next.